Iran's declaration that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until the end of Trump's term sounds like a definitive shutdown of global energy. But this is a strategic bluff, not an operational reality. The paradox is simple. For Iran to achieve total closure, they must destroy their own economy and invite a military response that guarantees regime collapse. They can threaten the world with chaos, but they cannot sustain it without committing economic suicide. This video explains why a permanent blockade is impossible for Tehran, revealing how incentives shape what looks like an imminent crisis into a game of political endurance. The structural constraint on Tehran's power lies in the asymmetry of consequences between disruption and total closure. While Iran possesses the asymmetric tools to create uncertainty, deploying naval mines, firing drones, and utilizing swarming fast boats, the cost of a permanent blockade is prohibitive. To understand why this threat cannot be executed as stated, we must look at what actually moves through these waters. The strait carries roughly 25% of global oil flows. More critically for the average person, it handles approximately one-third of all global urea exports. These are not abstract commodities. They are essential inputs that feed over 40% of human caloric intake in crops like wheat, rice, and maize. When leaders announce a closure, the headline is rarely the whole story. The question is, who designed the incentive, who cannot afford to walk away, and what option still looks rational on each side? In this case, Iran needs revenue more than it can survive without shipping oil out. Closing the strait severs their own primary export lifeline while simultaneously severing the supply lines for nitrogenous fertilizers that feed billions of people globally. The cost of the attack outweighs any strategic gain for Tehran because a total blockade is economically suicidal. By threatening to close the waterway, Iran creates a credible threat. Paradox where they can disrupt trade to raise prices and force diplomatic concessions without triggering the full-scale naval war that would end their regime. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. This distinction between disruption and closure explains why global markets often stabilize quickly despite aggressive rhetoric. If Iran blocks the strait indefinitely, they lose their own export income and trigger a global fertilizer crisis that would likely turn international opinion and potentially regional allies decisively against them. The data supports this strategic calculation. Despite threats of closure, commercial transits drop only fractionally before returning to pre-conflict levels. In one recent instance, following an announcement of reopening on April 17th, only 13 vessels successfully exited over 3 days before traffic resumed at normal rates. This pattern suggests that the threat is a leveraged tool for negotiation rather than an intent to destroy the flow of goods permanently. The conflict has shifted from a military contest to one of political endurance. Iran's strategy relies on creating enough uncertainty to drive up prices, forcing Washington and its allies to absorb economic pain without escalating to kinetic war. However, this approach hits hard limits when tested against actual maritime traffic data. While Iranian assets like drones and fast boats can disrupt specific convoys temporarily, they lack the capacity to sustain a prolonged blockade against the United States Navy's superior mine clearing and escort capabilities. The structural reality is that Iran cannot hold the strait closed for long without suffering catastrophic self-harm. Consider the global dependency on nitrogenous fertilizers produced in this region. Nearly 60% of total global fertilizer use accounted by nitrogen in 2023, with 45% dedicated to growing staple grains and cereals. If a closure were sustained, it would not just be an energy crisis. It would become a food security emergency affecting populations far beyond the Middle East. This creates a powerful deterrent against actual implementation. No regional ally or global power can afford for Iran to succeed in total closure because the fallout would destabilize economies worldwide and likely force intervention that Tehran cannot survive. The credible threat paradox means that Iran's real power lies in their ability to threaten disruption, not execute total closure. They are betting they can survive longer than Washington can tolerate the risk of a price spike or minor shipping delay. This is why you see periods of tension followed by rapid normalization rather than sustained shutdowns. The incentives favor maintaining a state of controlled chaos where prices fluctuate but trade continues. If Iran were to cross the line into total closure, they would be signaling an intent that guarantees their own economic destruction and military defeat. Understanding this prevents panic over global collapse scenarios and highlights that Tehran's strategy is one of brinkmanship, not capability. They are playing a high-stakes game where the cost of escalation rises exponentially with every ship stopped. The endgame is designed to extract concessions through fear of what could happen, relying on the fact that neither side wants to trigger the irreversible consequences of a total blockade. This reframes how we should interpret headlines about closed waterways. It isn't a binary switch where global trade stops. It is a leveraged threat used for negotiation leverage, not an actual intent to destroy the flow of goods permanently. The stakes are high regarding food security and energy prices, but the mechanism remains a bluff born of economic necessity rather than military capability. As long as Iran needs its oil revenue and fears regime collapse, they will continue to threaten closure without ever achieving it. The structural constraints ensure that while the strait may be contested, it cannot remain closed indefinitely. This is the reality of realpolitik. Threats are only credible if the threatener can survive the cost of carrying them out. In this case, Tehran knows full well that closing the door on global trade would mean locking themselves in a prison they could never escape. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.